welcome back to my channel. My name is Latresa. You know what? First of all, before I get started, let me check to make sure that my sound is good because that has always been an issue for me. So let me check real quick. Hello?
Hello?
Yay!
Yay!
That means I'm good. I'm clear. Okay. So I'm clear. I'm good. It is almost time for me to wash my hair. It's going on 2 weeks. Refresh my little twist I got going on here. But hi. If you are watching this later, you could just skip that part where I'm doing the sound check. I'm happy to be back on this channel talking to you all about things NYC, all about my experiences and lifestyle and health and wellness and spirituality and all the things. So let's just get into it, right? I'm a little chipper right now because I'm about to just like get this all out. But last night I could barely sleep because I had so much on my mind. So my first question for you all is, would you be able to put a price tag on pain and suffering? The last couple of days, I've been at the New York City, one of the New York City courthouses, serving jury duty. And I don't know if any of you have any experience with jury duty. Last year, actually 4 years ago, I was selected to come in for jury duty, but I wasn't put on a case. This time around, when I was selected to come in for jury duty, I was put on a case that was for the jury to only decide how much the plaintiff should get for pain and suffering. Now I'm going to give you guys like a little bit of background about the case. I'm allowed to talk about the case. The case is on public record. Now that the case is over, we just had our verdict yesterday. So now that the case is over, the judge has said we can talk to whomever we want about the case. I'm not going to say any names or anything like that just because that's not what this video is about. It was just interesting experience. So the plaintiff was suing for pain and suffering damages. He was in a car accident. He was riding an electric skateboard and a car that was coming out of a parking garage. He was riding an electric skateboard in the bike lane. A car that was coming out of the parking garage made a turn on a one-way street going in the wrong direction and hit the plaintiff who was riding his electric skateboard in the bike lane. Now, the defendant was already found guilty for negligence. Like he admitted that he was intentionally going the wrong way down a one-way street because he didn't want to go all the way around to get into a tunnel to go to where he lived. So this was like after work hours. So during the case, there were 4 testimonies: the plaintiff, the defendant, and there were 2 medical examiners. One medical examiner was the surgeon who operated on the plaintiff's shoulder. And then the second doctor was hired by the defense to examine the plaintiff's shoulder about a year or so after the accident. The plaintiff suffered from a broken shoulder, so he had a fracture in his left shoulder, and he had a torn rotator cuff. So he had to get surgery. He had to get the bone replaced and the rotator cuff repaired, and he also had like plastic, I don't know what they're called, but like he had plastic inserted into his shoulder to keep everything in place, to repair his injury. Y'all, after this case, well, first of all, I tried to stay emotionally detached from this case. And I did so good up until we got to the part where the jury needed to deliberate amongst ourselves and come up with a verdict and award damages to the plaintiff. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I'm leaving out as far as like the details of the case are concerned. As far as evidence is concerned, we saw x-rays, we saw the broken shoulder, we saw the tear in the rotator cuff. The plaintiff also had to go through about 6 to 8 months, I want to say, of rehabilitation for his shoulder, physical therapy. And also, the plaintiff at the time had a 4-month-old daughter. After his surgery, he was not able to, he had his arm in a sling. So he was not able to bathe himself. He was not able to use the bathroom on his own. He was not able to interact with his daughter the way that he would normally interact with his daughter because he couldn't, do things like pick her up. He could not help his wife. He and his wife worked full time. So his wife was still working full time, a full-time job at the time of his accident and through his recovery. So she had full responsibility of household care, and she had full responsibility of child care, and now the care of her husband, who was healing and recovering from his surgery. Now after, this is 4 years post accident, and there has been, the bone has healed in his shoulder, in the plaintiff's shoulder, but there's now calcification on his shoulder from trauma. Both doctors agreed that the calcification can cause long-term pain and limitation in the mobility of the arm. So now the plaintiff is not able to raise his arm past about here. If this is my shoulder, like I can do this, but his arm can't go past about here. And he has occasional pain. A week after his surgery, he was able to go back to work. He had a desk job. He's like a software engineer, and he had a programming job. He works for Grubhub. And so he was able to return to work a week after the surgery. And he was released from the surgery the day of. The anesthesia that he was given during the surgery was just kind of like an anesthesia you get in your tooth when you're about to do like a root canal or something. You're not totally put to sleep, but it's like a numbing agent. So he was awake during his surgery. He was prescribed oxycodone, which he could only take, the prescription I think was just to take it 2 or 3 times, and he developed some nausea and things from it, so he didn't take it past then. So throughout the majority of his surgery or his healing, he only was taking ibuprofen. And I think that is about all the details that are to really be considered, maybe, as far as pain and suffering goes, that I can think of off the top of my head. We were in court for 3 days, and on the 3rd day, we were asked to make our verdict, and we were not permitted to talk about the case with any of the jury members, with the plaintiff, the defendant, any of the attorneys on the case. We were instructed not to speak to any family members about the case. We could not talk about the case to or with anyone until after the verdict was given. So it was just really interesting. Like, once we got in the jury room, what people's thoughts were about the issue. I feel like, just personally, I feel like a lot of the people on the jury lacked empathy for this man. Um, and I'm not quite sure why that was. Um, but the plaintiff was a male of like Indian, like from India, like descent. And the defendant was Italian. And the jury consisted of one man and five women. I was the only brown girl. There was an Asian woman. There was three white women, and there was a white guy. And so yeah, I was the only brown woman on the jury. And like some people were given the opinion of, for example, I had expressed, how do you put a price tag on pain and suffering only? Now, this case was not about medical expenses. This case was not about lost work wages. This was strictly about him being compensated for pain and suffering. How do you put a price tag on that? That was like, it was so hard for me to really come to any kind of conclusion, because I'm like, he lost a lot of memories that could have been made with his daughter, his 4-month-old daughter at the time. He couldn't pick her up. And I brought that up, and I was like, those are memories that you can't get back. Like, your daughter's not 4 months old forever. And he was in a sling for about a year. So he missed about a year's worth of like really engaging with his newborn daughter. So I brought that up as a part of things that we should consider as far as pain and suffering. And like, our instructions were also in conjunction with that pain and suffering to evaluate like his loss of enjoyment of life. I mean, you got a newborn baby that you can't fully enjoy. And I thought that was pretty, like, kind of heartbreaking. And not like all of my jurors agreed. Like, one woman was just kind of like, well, it's not like he was in the hospital the whole time. He was able to be home with the baby. It's not like he missed out on a year of seeing her or wasn't even able to hug her. She was like, I could kind of like have more sympathy for that if he completely was not like around her for the year of her life. And I was like, okay. And then someone else opinion was kind of like, I mean, this is New York City. People get hit by cars all the time. And I was like, okay. Some other things that were part of his pain and suffering testimony was that it caused this accident, and him having to go through this process of surgery and rehabilitation caused strain on his marriage with his wife. And one of the jurors was like, well, I guess it didn't cause that much strain on his relationship with his wife, because they didn't seek counseling. It's not like this court case is about them recuperating fees for counseling to help them, get through this time. So how hard could it have been, really? That was something that the defense lawyer brought up. So they were kind of just regurgitating that, which I thought that was interesting as well. And then also in regards to childcare, one of the other juror members was like, why didn't they just hire a nanny? If it was so much work on the wife and it was causing a strain in their relationship, they could have just hired a nanny, and then through this court case also be suing for, to recoup the cost of hiring a nanny. I'm just sharing this with you all to give you an idea of like what kind of things go through people's minds potentially, like as they're on jury duty, like when they're trying to decide these types of things. One of my so as the jury, right? We had to decide what his pain and suffering was worth from the time of the accident to yesterday. And then we had to decide what his pain and suffering for the future would be. So we had to we literally had to come up with actual numbers for the defendant to pay the plaintiff for his pain and suffering post and future. Um, so that was kind of like some of the conversation that was happening in jury deliberation. The plaintiff's attorney threw some numbers out which she thought would be fair compensation for her client, for the plaintiff. And she suggested, or she asked for $750,000 for past pain and suffering and $1.1 million for future pain and suffering. I think the very first thing, if you're watching this, what are your thoughts on that? Like, I want to hear your thoughts on those numbers. I'm going to tell you what some of the jury members' thoughts were. That one of the first things that was said, once that door was closed and we were allowed to like start deliberating, like 90% of the jurors was like, that is outrageous. That is way too much money. No, like that's way too high. And then you heard kind of like where the conversation went after that and kind of like what some people's thoughts were. And we gave a verdict. And like for the verdict to go through, 5 out of 6 jurors have to be unanimous. And I mean, we all came to an unanimous agreement. I don't know how I feel about it. But now, I mean, it's over now. So like I've let it go for the most part. Except the fact that I had a really hard time falling asleep last night. But we did award him something for his past and his and his future suffering. Although the amounts that we awarded, most of the jury members did not even want to give him that. So I'll tell you what we awarded. We awarded $160,000 for his past pain and suffering. Initially, most of the jurors didn't want to give him anything for future pain and suffering, and that's what the defense attorney was arguing. He didn't throw out a number for what he thought that the plaintiff should get for his past pain and suffering, but he did say that he felt that that the plaintiff should get $0 for his future pain and suffering, because his argument was that the plaintiff had the surgery was successful and the plaintiff got better. He healed and he can still go to work. So he shouldn't get anything for future pain and suffering, although he's not 100% better because he cannot lift his hand like this. His hand only goes to about here. And he will always, for the rest of his life, have foreign objects now in his body, those plastic screws that's holding his shoulder together pretty much, or his rotator cuff together, or his muscle together, however that works. And because of the calcification that has built in his arm, he will always have limited range of motion in his arm, and he will always have occasional pain in his arm, and there is potential for future tear of his rotator cuff. Most of the jury was like, nothing. And I was like, yeah, but this is kind of like 50-50 chance. Maybe nothing does happen, no further damage does happen to him in the future, but there is still a 50% chance as far as we know, because they didn't give us any statistics, any numbers for like what's the percentage of people who have these types of surgeries there is a reoccurring tear or future, yeah, like a reoccurring tear of the rotator cuff. Like, what are the odds of that? What's the percentage of that happens to people? So as far as we know, it's 50-50. I also brought up the point of like, now he also has a 5-month-old. So now he has a 4-year-old and a 5-month-old. This accident happened back in October of 2018. And of course, because of everything that's been going on in the world, the case had been delayed until now. And I brought up the fact that because also we were supposed to consider the loss of enjoyment of life. So I was like, can we please consider before everybody's just like give him $0 for future pain and suffering that he has a 5-month-old and he has a 4-year-old. Both of those ages are very, especially the 4-year-old, that's like an active age. I have nieces and nephews and from 7 years old and down, and they are very active, they are very clumsy, they are very hyper at times. They want to play, they're on trampolines, they're swimming, they're learning how to ride skateboards and playing on the playground and falling. And as a parent, you have to be ready for anything. You got to be ready if your child is about to fall off the play set or something. Might have to do a dive move and catch them. This man cannot now fully enjoy and interact with his children the way that he would have been able to before this accident. I feel like that is a tremendous loss of enjoyment of life. Like, besides work and home, that's like 100% of your life. Like, so like 50% of your life now you cannot enjoy the way you might have because of this accident. And it's crazy because like I expressed this to the jury and all they did was kind of like shake their head and completely change the subject to something else. They did consider eventually they got back to what I was saying, but like it was like nobody really had any kind of like compassion. And there was a woman on the jury that was pregnant with her 3rd child. So I thought at least she would kind of be able to understand like what I was saying, but she kind of had the least compassion for what I was saying, which was like such a surprise to me. But yeah, so I guess now you can, oh, and then the icing on the cake was once we read the verdict in court, we were leaving the courtroom and the defense and his attorney were leaving kind of like a little bit ahead of us, and they were like kids in a candy store after the case was done. They were like joking and laughing and like so excited about the verdict, and it really made me feel like crap because the way their response was to the verdict, it made me feel like the criminal got off. It just wasn't a good feeling. It wasn't a good feeling at all because like throughout the case, they were very straight-faced, no emotion, nothing. Like the prior 2 days that we had seen them, they were just very straight-faced and emotionless. And as soon as they got that verdict and got out of that courtroom, they were literally almost like, well, figuratively skipping down the hallway with joy as to what the verdict was. And I had a really hard time with that. And my thoughts about jury duty after this is like, I don't think I ever want to do it again. The judge came out and thanked us afterwards, and he was like, this was like a really easy case compared to like what some people get selected to do. Like, it was a relatively short case. We were only here for 3 days. Some people are here for like weeks, depending on like what the case is. And he was just like, you all did a really good job. Most people, after they finish doing jury duty, say they had such a great experience and they're glad that they did it. And I was not feeling any of those things, honestly. I felt really bad, and I also felt like, dang, like I don't ever want to kind of have to make a decision like that in regards to somebody else's life ever again. Like I don't know what kind of enjoyment people get out of that. Um, Maybe some people like the power of being able to make a big decision like that in regards to someone else's life. But I thought about it and I was like, okay, how would issues like that get settled? They had a jury come in to hear these testimonies and to make a final decision because the defense and the plaintiff could not come to an agreement on what the damages for pain and suffering should be. So they had 6 random people who are completely detached from anybody involved in the case. They tried to make it, completely detached for anybody that has experienced a personal injury case or works for an insurance company that handles personal injury cases. They tried to make sure like the 6 people they chose were as detached from the situation and the elements of the situation as possible to try to get unbiased of opinions and verdict as possible. But I was just like, okay, I guess if they didn't do it that way, how would these types of cases be decided? Um, would the judge just then decide? But then it's like, I don't know. I just feel like that kind of decision is a lot of power for anybody to have to be able to make. So I mean, that's pretty much my my New York City jury duty experience. Literally, I had to like walk for a couple blocks and get some air after I came out of the courthouse. I was like on the verge of tears. My stomach was just like upset. I just was like not feeling good about the situation at all. Hi, Deborah. Shalom. Happy Shabbat Prep Day. Happy Shabbat Prep Day to anybody who's prepping for the Sabbath. Thanks for joining me. I'm pretty much wrapping up this story. So, whenever you have time, because I know Shabbat Prep is a busy day for everybody, I'm like, had a moment to just do this video real quick before I get back to my cleaning and prepping for dinner tonight. But yeah, so I guess again, like the question that I started out with is, what would you be able to put a price on someone else's pain and suffering? And that's basically what I had to do during my experience in jury duty the last couple of days. And also, once you listen to the details of this video and kind of the things that I listed as pain and suffering that the plaintiff went through, how would you determine how to put a price on pain and suffering for this particular case? If anybody else has ever done jury duty, because this was heavy for me and I felt like I stayed emotionally detached for most of the time, but when it got to that verdict and then I saw the defense reaction at the end and the plaintiff and his attorney reaction at the end, I was like, ugh, I couldn't take it. I couldn't take it. So if anyone has any experiences with jury duty, please, I would love to hear them. Please share them in the comments. If you have any thoughts about anything that I shared, anything that you would have done differently, any questions that you would have asked the judge, or any things that you would have brought up to the other members of the jury during this time, anything that you feel like you would have needed to consider additionally to come to a verdict on this case, or anything you just want to comment in general, I would love to hear it. I want to say thank you so much for everyone who has subscribed to this channel. I will be hopping on here a lot more often. I know I might say that and then it might be like a week before I get back on here, but I do have a lot of amazing videos in the archives for you all that I just need to put final editing touches on. So again, if you're prepping for Shabbat, happy Shabbat prep day. And I will go ahead and say Shabbat Shalom right now because I probably won't be back on here at least until sometime next week. So have an awesome, amazing rest of your day, and I'll see you all soon. Shalom.